Did you know that there are two different types of introverted sensing? In this video, we're going really deep, really geeky into a bunch of jargon as we talk about introverted sensing and the two different variations of it, analytic and holistic. This comes from Dario Nardi's book, Decode Your Personality, Go Beyond Myers-Briggs with 64 brain-based subtypes. The reason why you want to know this is because if you are an introverted sensor, you've taken one of the assessments, you're an ISJ, ESJ, and something about it just doesn't quite fit with a lot of the stereotypes, a lot of the stuff that you hear about it, even from my channel, you might be a different blend of it that isn't highlighted as much. Or maybe if it's not one of your core strengths, you can get a better understanding of both sides of introverted sensing, and you can hopefully lean into the one that is more like you and develop it a little bit more in an easier way. I'm an INFP, my name's Matt Sherman, and introverted sensing is my tertiary function. So I'm going to be reading through this and kind of giving a INFP reacts to the explanations that Dario Nardi has put in this book, and we can kind of talk about also some of my understandings of it and how I relate to introverted sensing as well. And this time, the microphone is on. Introverted sensing, SI. Let's get into one of society's most common functions, introverted sensing, SI. It's particularly important to talk about the two sides of SI because these folks, the SJ types, are so numerous. There are many tens of millions in America, not to mention probably 1 billion people around the world. So my father is an ESFJ and my stepmom is an ESTJ. So definitely have two of those, and one of my best friends is an ESTJ. My mother-in-law over here in Japan is an ESFJ. They're abundant. So better get to know them, right? Type materials often describe them in a stereotypical way. For the more extroverted, ESTJ or ESFJ, type tends to exaggerate the dominant function in a negative way. For example, describing ESTJ as just a finger-wagging flavor of extroverted thinking. Of course, there are less stellar individuals we can all point to who are like this simply because this function is so common, but it's far from the whole picture. Dun dun dun, the plot thickens. One really important thing is to pay attention to your internal biases, whether it's a favorable bias or a negative bias. You get tons of comments in any YouTube video of one person who has obviously had a bad relationship with a certain type, or maybe even a couple, and then they blame the entire type for being horrible people. Somebody said recently in one of the comments, all INFPs should just stay single because you are, and he talked about playing with people's minds and emotions and stuff. Well, that person probably had a bad experience with an INFP, but that does not mean that all of us are that way. Same with any personality type. And if you keep finding that to be true, then sorry to say, but it's probably within you. And one of the core approaches that I bring to typology, hopefully, is the RPG model and personifying these different cognitive functions within you and building intrapersonal rapport with them as characters, as anthropomorphized, personified, humanized characters within yourself, parts of yourself that you can learn to have a better relationship with. And then that expands out into how you deal with other people too and how you relate to other people. It's been a game changer for me, and that's part of the reason why I made Path of Heroes Academy, poha.geekpsychology.com, if you're into this stuff. And now, back to the show. One side is the yang version of SI. I describe it like a defender, anchor, guard, or protector. These SI users have a solid, firm sense of culture and history, can talk about it and take pride in it, and see it as something very important. It's not just that they're an anchor. I personally really, like this version of introverted sensing. Even within the RPG model, I called it the stabilizing guardian, introverted sensing. And in every rendition of it, pretty much that I've come up with for myself, of all the characters that I make, usually it's like a plate mail warrior holding a shield, all about duty, like a dwarf, right? And like I'm gonna be here and protect my team and be the anchor for my team. So that could be a hint that that is the one that I favor. As my grandmother with ESTJ preferences would say, it's as if at any moment society can regress into barbarism because of human nature, though probably not overnight. We enjoy all of these institutions which took centuries to build to tame the worst side of our nature and channel our potential. She was clear about what the institutional strengths and weaknesses are, and what's important from culture and history, and what to stick to. So these SI users hold strong impressions about these, usually from their upbringing, though they can come later in life too, if really impactful. That must be terrifying for SJs to have that thought of like, well, if we don't maintain this, then it's going to go completely to extroverted, intuiting chaos, and everything is just going to be all over the place. And so we need to like maintain it. It's like being in a stronghold and protecting the ground, right? From, swarms of zombies and monsters, and must be terrifying. As somebody who has INFP preferences, I like extroverted intuiting. I like a little bit of chaos, at least a little. They hold strong impressions about the things that we're going to guard, protect, and rely upon. We're was in parentheses with an exclamation point. They're like the pillars in the Acropolis. Some of them may crumble and the roof may come down, but we can still hold firm to the image of the Acropolis and what it stood for in its golden age: democracy, education, science, philosophy, and all of those things. Sounds cool to me. If you look at what's going on with Yang SI, the not-so-hidden agenda aims to civilize and to be civil. That doesn't necessarily mean nice, traditional, or orderly. It just means civil. And they're not necessarily hysterical about safety. Oh, well, maybe I was mistaken. They know there are times when you need to court danger or go to war. So let's do that smartly and purposefully. At the same time, they do prefer familiarity, safety, and convenience, and they are going to block big or dangerous changes. And they do tend to be traditional. Again, it's around this organizing sense that's deep within them, a very firm sense of history and culture, grounded in all of the personal impressions associated with those. So maybe my understanding was a little bit too skewed to one side of it, but it does still seem to have that like, we're going to approach this with stability first and maintain consistency to the best of our ability. And sometimes in order to do that, we have to take the offensive, I suppose. There are competing definitions of SI. Often what we see is sequencing, recalling, comparing, stabilizing, or comforting. All of these are behaviors that support SI as a form of consciousness. Specifically, sequencing and recalling factual details show up with the Yang version of SI, which is the one that we're reading about right now. It's an analytical left brain approach to dealing with the psychological impact of sensory impressions. So this is talking about introverted sensing as capturing sensory impressions, storing them, and then recalling them in a sequential way to understand what happened, how it happened, and then to implement that in order to maintain stability. All things I wish I was better at. Now there's another version of SI, a holistic or yin version, which is not anchored in one specific or particular thing. Instead, it comes off as very grounded in everything. There's home, the workplace, and the community and traditions. And then there's an enormous database of personal memories. And it's not just a select few of those that act as pillars. It's the entire vista, the entire museum of everything that's from their life. And that provides a very grounded, comforting feeling. So the first one, the Yang side, is talking again about the analytic version of it, left brain. It's more, as you would imagine, like logical, right? Sequencing. And this right side, holistic, the yin version, is talking about using it as like a web of cultural traditions, a web of experiences to pull from that are all necessary, I suppose, instead of like a couple core key pillars. And I would imagine that this is going to say that each of those each of those experiences, right, are core key pieces that build into making you who you are, emerging into who you are based off all of these things that happen, not just a core couple key pillars of, what is important. There's no one thing you can ever point to with Yin SI. We can pull this or that leg from the chair of life, and the chair still stands. Of course, they're likely not going to enjoy the loss, but at least that chair has 1,000 legs. That sounds horrifying. A chair with 1,000 legs. Thusly, they're more adaptable to changes because they have a receptive style and because they have a wide grounding in all of their memories. They can say, for example, okay, today's fashion is different, and now people wear black lipstick or funny shoes, or we're all supposed to wear a mask now. Whatever it is, it's just one more thing that goes into their database, the sense experience database. Of course, they prefer things to be safe and comfortable and familiar, and they may not be quick at all to adapt a new practice or style, but they can roll with it, or at least endure it. So again, we're talking about a more blended version of all of these experiences, and it seems to be more adaptable and more able to just accept different changes. And this sounds a lot chiller than most of the stereotypical versions of introverted sensing, or the stereotypical impressions of people who use it. Definitely reminds me of my grandma, probably, who was ISFJ, I'm guessing, and just like, oh, hello, I've got some cookies for you, come on, this is the house, and always something ready, and just very nurturing and caring and sweet. And kind of adaptable with anything. Anything goes, anything's fine, anything's okay. And she's there to maintain the hearth. These SI users are highly sensitive to subtle sensory variations because their database is so big and things are not just pushed into a box. Asking, is it black or white, is the Yang version of SI, the left brain. This Yin version sees a palette of 64 million colors, tastes, textures, and sounds. Every color or such differs a tiny bit, and every color or pattern of colors evokes something different within them and others. At the same time, they're pretty comfortable flowing with the culture and where the culture changes, provided it's not too fast. A palette is rich in options. That's cool. I was just telling my wife today that I have no ability to distinguish different colors. Purple is purple, blue is blue. I can't really name those or distinguish any of those, nor remember any of those food qualities and stuff. I don't know. A couple years ago, I made a video on tasting an apple because I don't do it. I just put it in my mouth as nutrients. I eat to live. I don't live to eat, which is more of an extroverted sensing thing. They will surely complain along the way if things are too abrupt and too different. They will grumble like Marge Simpson. But nonetheless, there is a groundedness that you can't take away. Rather than a knight in armor, they are the hearth. That's why I said hearth before, because I knew the word. But that's quite the different approach, the different way of looking at it, right? As I was saying, the knight in armor, I said a guardian in armor with the shield up, and then the hearth. The one that's maintaining the fire, keeping the culture alive, keeping the citizens, the community alive. To continue, that's the word I use. The hearth warms the home, and they can be a hearth almost everywhere they go as long as it's within their range of experience. Another word I might use is table. They are the table where everyone meets and finds nourishment. I just got the impression of a big banquet from one kingdom, and everybody's coming from all around, all these different kingdoms, to be hosted, to come and share in the experience of blending cultures and experiences. Firstly, when I talk about memories or impressions, I'm talking about how Jung described SI. People argue about how to define introverted sensing. Well, just go read the book, please. Go back to Psychological Types, Chapter 10. Jung talks clearly. SI is a lot about building up a giant database of sensory impressions. And those impressions easily override actual, later, tangible experiences. Think of a person who got sick after eating sushi and will forever experience sushi in that way, regardless of how it actually tastes now, what restaurant they go to, or whatever. There's just an overriding sense experience that happens. In short, as Jung said, SI is a subjective, personal relationship to the sensory world. It's really interesting, like having studied neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis as well, and knowing that we can attach all of these experiences and thoughts and beliefs to specific triggers, like eating sushi or smelling sushi, and people can develop allergies through that traumatic response of the body. Within NLP and hypnosis, you can treat allergies as a phobic response from the body. Like something happened a long time ago, and the unconscious mind, the body, got the impression that this is bad for us. So it creates a system of responses that makes it so that you don't experience that again, because it keeps you away from whatever the thing was. If it's eating shrimp, I wouldn't suggest doing it with something that there's a chance of anaphylactic shock, unless you have a doctor there, of course, to support and to test it properly in a safe way. But I did it with hay fever, and just essentially kind of reminded my body and my unconscious mind that it's okay. Like, this isn't bad for us. We're fine. Other people don't have the allergy. I don't need it either. And it got rid of it. And how that connects to introverted sensing, I'm kind of thinking of it as so maybe the holistic side, you have all of these different sensory impressions in this database that are attached to, as the example that Dario gave, eating the specific kind of sushi. And once you get rid of the core main ones, or you rewrite it, you re-educate your body, your system, your experiences, whether it's going back to the experience and imagining it and pretending with a bit of self-hypnosis and rewriting the experience as if you are the director, and allowing that to ripple out into the present and the future. I think you can do some really cool stuff with this. And I'm thinking that the holistic side, the yin side of this, the hearth side, would maybe have an easier experience with that, because this table has 1,000 legs, and it's if trained properly, it would see it as safer. Maybe the yang side, if it's got only a couple of these really strong, firm pillars of experiential database that it trusts, and you try to get rid of one of those, then maybe it wouldn't like that. I hope that makes sense. That's what's going through my mind anyway. Second, based on brain imaging, the resulting neural maps show just as much variety among SI folks as everyone else. There are ISTJs with a creative starburst neural pattern, and ISFJs with a dominant frontal cortex bias, and so on. And when we look at their professions, from painter to accountant and dozens of others, we see that the SI folks come in all flavors as richly as everyone else. Yum. Third, when we consider both sides of SI, we see it as both an anchor and a home for people. That sounds so wholesome. But of course, children are impressionable, and a person's childhood is not necessarily wholesome. Yeah. Nor are the impacts necessarily conscious. People hold all sorts of attitudes, attractions, and preferences based on impressions provided by family and society, pleasant or not, healthy or not, rational or not. So for all the folks, especially with an intuiting preference, who tend to downplay or deride SI, remember, you've got SI too. The question is what kind and about what? And it may be that someone actually has a SI preference, say ISFJ instead of INFJ, and that's okay. When we acknowledge the subjective aspect of SI, we give it all the dimensions that it's due. I think that's great. Yes, negative experiences and growing up with problems or parents that are racist can shape how children evolve, right? And how they grow. And unfortunately, some people don't get the education that you can change that, or they don't allow themselves to have permission to do that, or the environment continues to attempt to keep them in the same place. And that becomes really hard, especially I would imagine for somebody who prefers introverted sensing, because like as a perceiving function is really adaptable, which is maybe surprising to many people. But like if they don't have uh, a reference for what should be done in this culture, whether it's a classroom culture or a country culture, whatever that is, then they are adaptable because they're exploring. They're saying, well, what should I be doing here? How should I be acting? What's expected of me? How do people interact with each other? And then once that is learned, then they can start behaving according to the culture, or they have a place kind of to slot it within their memory, or they know where to put the table leg, I suppose, if that metaphor even works. And so if you grow up in a family culture that has certain expectations, then you would kind of assume that that's the right thing to do and that's how the world works. Which is why, one of the reasons why for everybody, I recommend traveling around the world, exploring different cultures, because it shakes so many things loose within you. And like, this is, what I understood the world to be from when I lived in Michigan is completely different than what I know now from having lived in Korea and Japan for 17 years. And I went to Shanghai for a little bit, just for like 4 days. Just kind of traveling around really gives you this different perspective and adds more experiential seeds within your database. And once you get enough of those, then you can start connecting the patterns even more. And for INFPs, if we get stuck too much in introverted sensing, and we're afraid of getting new experiences because we got to put ourselves out there in the scary world where all the dragons are, all the new possibilities, the things that we don't know what will happen or how it will affect us. If we get stuck in that introverted sensing, whether it's the holistic hearth side or the analytic defender side, it can be detrimental to our growth because we need to learn more about who we are. And if you get more experiences, putting yourself into different contexts, then you have a larger reservoir of introverted sensing experiences to pull from. And that's how you can be more resourceful, because you know that it's possible to do more different things. And if you're ready to learn more about extroverted intuiting, you can check out this one over here. We go through the same experience as we just did with introverted sensing, but it's for extroverted intuiting, so you can get to learn more about that. All right. Let me know down below which one is your type, the analytic side or the holistic side. And good luck, have fun. Peace.